come to order for this May 16th workshop meeting of the Bridgton Planning Board. I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have two guests tonight. We'll turn the floor over to them in hopefully just a few minutes. Next thing on the agenda, we won't be appointing an alternate tonight, or will we? Yes. At the moment, I don't think we're going to vote on anything, but Mr. Harden is not here, so I appoint Ms.
Well, we vote on the finding of facts.
Oh, yeah, we do. We're about to do that, too.
Yep.
Okay. First order of business, approval of the minutes of the prior workshop. I think that was April 18th. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gibbs, second by Ms. DiPietro. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. 5-0. Next order of business, Blueberry Hill, findings of fact and conclusions of law. Could I have a motion to approve those findings of fact and conclusions of law? Moved by Mr. Madsen, seconded by Mr. Gibbs. Any discussion?
I'll check with the secretary. There are two corrections, but
Okay.
it's grammatical.
Here, you don't even have to do that. You
Oh.
can make them on this,
Hello.
and then we'll give them to Tori.
The findings of fact?
Yeah,
Yes.
so you can just make the changes, and I will initial them.
Okay.
And that's good enough. Next on the agenda is the findings of fact and conclusions of law for C&P subdivision. Mr. Sawyer is just going to give us a very brief overview of what's been done since the meeting, which were conditions of the approval.
So I have conditions, a couple things that were on both projects. I'll go over them real quick. On the Blueberry Hill one, we added a note to the plan that was a request of the board regarding the road being a non-conforming road, and it's to stay that way as it states in your ordinance. It's not meant to become a town road. So we added that note. And we also, there was discussion, we added a note that these three lots will become part of the homeowners association, and that the homeowners association would prepare a road maintenance plan, which is, again, part of your ordinance. So that was the Blueberry Hill one. On the Renneker one, you asked that the buffers on the original plan, excuse me, be shown. So we've done that. Some of them are meadow buffers, some are wooded buffers. We've defined those on this plan. This is the buffer, the new buffer to be established on this lot 6, which is one of the ones being approved under the review at this time. So that's it, quickly on both projects.
Could I have a motion to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law for C&P, moved by Mr. Madsen, seconded by Mr. Gibbs? Any discussion? Mr. Gibbs?
Besides a few changes, there is a numerical error on number 4. It has the acreage as 10.29, and then on 8 it has it as 10.27. Because it's numerical, it probably should be acknowledged.
We'll go with 10.29.
Yeah, it's 10.29.
Anything else?
I'll correct the thing.
Okay. Did we actually vote on the,
We have a
moving too
vote.
fast, we haven't voted on the first one, right?
Oh,
Did we vote on
did?
Blueberry Hill?
Oh,
No.
oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll do one after the other. Any more discussion on C&P Ridge? All in favor of C&P Ridge, findings of fact and conclusions of law, please raise your hand. 5-0. Now we'll go back to the motion that was actually still on the table. Sorry for that
It's okay.
mess up. All in favor of the findings of fact and conclusions of law for Blueberry Hill? Please raise your hand. 5-0.
All right,
And we'll sign that later on. If not tonight,
okay.
we'll get folks to sign it.
And I do have one other thing you asked for on the CP one was, I have a good copy of the recorded plan, the original recorded plan that I'll leave with you also.
Yep, signed up that.
So I'll just leave all those with you, and then Brenda or somebody can let us know when they're ready.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
And you can just drop those off with Tori, and
Okay,
we'll either sign them at the end of the night or...
all right, thank you. So just leave those, I'll take them.
Okay.
So that's the one for Brenda. That's a copy of the recorded plan. There's two of each of those. One you keep, sign them both, and then you keep one and I'll go back and get the other ones. Okay, thank you.
One second here. Looks like it. Stole my thingamajig. Okay. Alrighty, next order of business is our workshop on LD 2003 with Maine, with representatives from the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, which is Hillary Gove and Benjamin Averill. I'm going to turn the floor over to them in a minute. The way we'll work this, and we don't right now have a ton of people, so, but that might change. We're going to have them, anybody can ask questions. We're going to let Ben and Hillary recognize people. We're going to start with the Bridgton board, and then we're going to move to everybody else. And then when you've exhausted yourself there, we can move back to the Bridgton board, and then we'll tie it back up at the end. And I think Hillary and Ben usually start with a couple questions for the audience, in fact. So I'll give the floor over to you folks to get things rolling. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
As was just mentioned, I'm Ben Averill, and my colleague is Hillary Gove, and we are the two program coordinators for the Housing Opportunity Program through the Department of Economic and Community Development. One of the main tasks that we have been working on, our program has been in existence for about 6 months, and one of the main tasks we've been working on is the beginning stages of implementation of LD 2003, as well as providing technical assistance like what we're doing tonight to communities and to folks that want to know what exactly LD 2003 is. I think I have an understanding of the folks that are here, but just in case there's any background we should give more than normal. If you have no idea, if you have not heard of LD 2003, if you feel comfortable, raise your hand. Perfect. That's what we assumed, but we want to make sure. So my guess would be probably tonight we will go relatively deep into the weeds, especially with the board here, but we'll do our best to kind of get into weeds if there are questions from folks that either are from a separate town or aren't part of the planning board here tonight from Bridgton. So it may be a little bit challenging in the fact that things can get very technical very quickly, but we'll do our best to answer especially very hypothetical questions.
And why don't you just tell us a little bit about your two backgrounds?
As I mentioned, I'm Ben Averill. Before taking this position about 6 months ago, I have had different roles in the planning field. More recently, I was the planning director for the city of Bath for about 5 years. And then I've worked in a couple of other communities, generally on the mid-coast as well. And I did a little bit of economic development work in my past experience as well.
Hi everyone, my name's Hillary Gove, and as Ben mentioned, I'm the other co-coordinator of the Housing Opportunity Program. Prior to taking on this role, I worked for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I primarily did rulemaking for the department. And prior to that, I served as a law clerk for the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. So my experience is more in state government.
Okay. Maybe real quick, just give the brief overview of the LD 2003 components, just in case there's some that might not know them all.
Do you want to do the bucket?
Sure. Generally, we like to talk about LD 2003 as being 3 primary buckets, which is 3 primary statutes of LD 2003. So the first bucket or statute is the Affordable Housing Development Density Bonus section, which allows developers to take advantage of a density bonus on certain lots of land, including lots that allow multifamily housing, that are in designated growth areas, or have access to public water or sewer or something comparable. The second bucket is the up to 4 dwelling unit bucket, which allows between 2 and 4 dwelling units on lots, depending on if those lots are in designated growth areas or have access to public water and sewer or comparable systems in a municipality without a comprehensive plan. And the final bucket is the accessory dwelling unit bucket, which allows individuals to add an accessory dwelling unit onto their lots with an existing single-family home.
And when we're thinking about those 3 buckets, generally when we're talking to multiple communities or folks throughout the state, we're trying to just share that, as Hillary mentioned, some communities may have to make changes to their ordinance to allow all of those 3 statutes, all of the requirements of those 3 statutes, while others may only have 1 or 2 of those statutes that are required. Generally speaking, any municipality throughout the state that has zoning, or potentially communities that don't have zoning, would need to adopt a provision related to accessory dwelling units. And depending on communities, depending on, as Hillary mentioned, whether there is public water or sewer, or a designated growth area in a comprehensive plan, you may need to also amend your ordinances to allow the multiple dwellings on a lot provision as well as the affordable housing provision. And that's generally the easiest way of thinking about it, but we're happy to get very nuanced, or as nuanced as possible tonight. Sometimes if you get really far into the weeds, it ends up being easier to talk less in a larger group setting and more on a one-on-one basis, which we're happy to do as well.
And generally, we know that some communities use the term designated growth area, other communities might use the term priority development zone. So we use this term designated growth area, but we know that communities use other terms. So if that doesn't apply to your community, we're happy to dive deeper into the weeds to see where additional development might be allowed under LD 2003.
Okay. All right, so why don't we open the floor to questions, and I'll let Ben and Hillary recognize folks.
Great. Do you want to start up that end? Yes.
I may be terribly dense here, but in your buckets, you said the first was the affordable housing density bonus, and the second was up to 4 units. And then you added in the second one in communities without a comprehensive plan. So they're substantially the same, except one is the second one is without a comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
That is correct. That's a very small nuance between the first statute, which is the Affordable Housing Development Statute, versus the up to 4 dwelling units section.
So
that's correct.
Being that Bridgton has a comprehensive plan, we're really just dealing with your first and third bucket?
Dealing with all three. So,
Well, what's the difference between A and B?
That's a great question. We've actually heard that a lot, which is challenging Before I answer that, I'm going to back up. One thing we didn't do, which we generally do, for anybody who wanted to go all the way into these chapters themselves, whether it's members of the board or someone that we're listening on at home or members in the audience. So each of those three buckets, as we call them, are different statutes. The affordable housing density bonus is 30A MRS 4364. The multiple dwellings on a lot, the up to 4 dwellings on a lot, is 30A MRS 4364A. And the ADU provision is 30 MRS 4364B. Because they're 3 separate statutes, they are technically 3 different things. And I think that's where we've heard we've heard folks that have been confused and they've been wondering what exactly is the affordable housing provision and does that apply to all of those components?
Oh, I see. So
it doesn't
A is
necessarily.
affordable and B is any housing.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I think that is a good reminder that I think we often hear this common misconception that affordable is throughout the entire LD 2003, all 3 statutes, but that is actually not the case, and that the affordable as defined in rule and in statute is really applied to the affordable housing development section. Otherwise, ADUs or additional dwelling units on lot do not need to have that affordable definition as stated in rule.
Go ahead.
Yeah, is it possible to play a little game? If I give you dimensional standards for one of our zones, can you say too much or that's okay?
We will do our best to do our best Bob Barker impersonation. But
Okay. In the rural neighborhood, 80,000 square feet per dwelling unit, too much or?
So I feel badly saying I was going to play the game and not necessarily playing the game. But I think one thing we've been trying to get communities to be aware of is LD 2003 does allow you to pick your own dimensional standards. So we don't necessarily have a recommendation on whether 1 acre lot size, a half-acre lot size, or
Okay.
something different
That's good.
is appropriate. That's something that we would recommend that this board, or if there's other members of boards in the audience, that you determine that with your individual communities. But the 4364A, the multiple dwellings on a lot provision, does require that those land area requirements are the same for additional units. So if you say 1 acre is the required lot size for 1 unit, then you need to have 1 acre or less for the additional units going forward.
I see.
Okay,
Yeah. Can I do one more?
sure.
How about 100-foot frontage?
So again, the frontage requirement would be totally whatever you were to choose as a board and as a greater community. That sounds fine as someone who I think has about 100 feet at his own house, but it would be up to your individual community to decide. The 2 of the 3 provisions of LD 2003 do not necessarily require you to change frontage requirements or setback requirements or those types of dimensional requirements. You certainly are able to think about them as you're thinking about any additional increases in density, but statute does not require you to actually change those components of the frontage and the setbacks and those types of things.
Great. Can I ask one other frontage question? I don't mean to be frontage here. If you're going to put an additional dwelling unit on a lot, can they one go behind the other?
Yeah,
Yes.
it really just depends on sort of what you set as your frontage requirements and, setbacks requirements. But really placement is up to the community to decide if it's going to be attached, within, detached. It's really up to you.
And I may be wrong in remembering this, but I was trying to do a little bit of homework before we came. You have areas here in Bridgton that have water and sewer capabilities, but you have areas that do not as well.
Right.
Okay. So then the only thing that may limit the placement of a structure may be any of the components of the leach field or other stormwater or other wastewater components.
You know, that makes sense.
And that would be something that you probably already have written into a code somewhere. So, or at least your code enforcement office is probably utilizing those even if you don't have that in a code somewhere.
Okay, well, thank you.
You got one down there.
Go ahead.
Hi, that was a perfect intro to my question there, because it does impact on things like areas where we don't have public sewer. So for communities or parts of communities facing additional dwelling units on lots of adequate size, so they'd meet dimensional requirements, but marginal soils, can we put additional protections in place over and above what is required by the state? Things like, well, we've been tossing around buildable area of a lot as opposed to the actual square, just gross square footage. And other communities that I've been in, nitrate plume modeling required for the septic design so that there's less possibility of contamination of well either on the same lot or in neighboring lots, those kinds of things. Have those been projected by anybody to you?
Yes, we've certainly heard of communities doing sort of buildable area or net lot size. And I also think it's important to note that communities alongside their code enforcement officer are determining what is considered adequate water and sewer. So that would really be up to your discretion what's considered adequate as stated in the law. So I think that there are ways to ensure that you are responsibly putting dwelling units on lots that have meet the correct standards for water and sewer.
I have a question for whichever member of the board wants to answer, I guess. I should have looked at this, but is there a minimum threshold where where your review process shifts from the code enforcement officer to you all here at the table tonight, a certain number of dwelling units or a certain amount of development?
When it gets to 3 dwelling units, which is defined as a subdivision, or if it's a multifamily dwelling of 3 dwelling units, which goes through site plan, then that comes to the planning board. One in a duplex, and this will be one of my questions, a duplex and a single home go through the code enforcement officer.
So then those two processes, either the code enforcement office for the 2 or less units or the folks up here for anything greater than that, you would be that determining body of making sure that that there's adequate capacity for water and for wastewater.
On top of what Deb said, 3 or more being defined as a subdivision, we're used to. But now what this is saying is on a single lot, you can have as many as 4 on a single lot. Is that a subdivision?
The short answer is yes. It would most likely trigger subdivision review. The longer answer is there were questions about that raised not only to us as we were going through rulemaking, but to folks in the legislature as well. And there are a couple of bills before the state legislature to try to determine, is 3 the correct number for subdivision review? Should it be 4 or some other number? But as of today's subdivision statute, it's still the same as it has been. So 3 or more separate units, units not within the same structure, would require subdivision review.
So that's really a change, because normally one house on one lot is beyond the scope of the planning board, or at least this board. So that if someone were to go to our code officer with permission for building permits for that many structures, that would automatically become a subdivision and would come to this board. Maybe, depending on what the legislature decides in its wisdom. Can I ask another question? You mentioned, or Ken mentioned dimensional requirements with so many units. And you said, well, there could be a unit within a structure, more than one, or behind. I think that was this question, behind. So you can count as this up to 4 dwelling units in 2 duplexes, but you can't require it. Or can you require that on small lots or some lots, when people want to take this to its furthest extension, furthest distance?
Yeah, that's all right.
Is that all right, Karen?
Yeah,
Okay,
fine.
thank you. And want to, in order not to have on moderate lots, plump, 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 is it possible for the board to require that until a lot reaches a certain size threshold, those multiple units, up to 4, must be in one structure, either an apartment building or 2 duplexes or whatever, cluster, whatever?
We were actually just chatting about this earlier today for a different community, or at least a similar question.
Since one size is apparently supposed to fit all in this, what did you determine?
So the statute itself is relatively silent on how you, what other provisions go into your local ordinance outside of the fact that you have to allow those 4 units, that your allowed uses have to allow those 4 units on a lot. So we determined, at least in our conversation between ourselves today, that you do have flexibility to have some provisions, whether it's enhanced buffering, whether it's the relative placement of the structures. We believe you probably would be able to create an ordinance that would require them to be all in the same structure or within, set up as 2 duplexes. One of the interesting things about LD 2003 is it's all new. So
Right.
we would certainly recommend running that by your legal counsel, just to verify that they don't have any concerns about creating other nuanced components like that. But I think on face value, yes, LD 2003 is silent, so you would be able to add those additional provisions in. Where we were going with our conversation quickly this afternoon, or earlier today, was more around how that could look on a lot. And one thing that we didn't end up sharing with the community, but I had thought about while we were talking in the office, was you will have to determine as a board and as a greater community what threshold you're looking for these projects to meet. So currently, this board does not review duplexes. So if you do require only 2 duplexes on the lot, you'll have to determine who's reviewing that. Is that the folks up here at the table, or is that your code enforcement
Well, but
office?
2 duplexes would be 4 structures, dwelling units, on a single lot, and that would be a subdivision, wouldn't it?
Potentially.
Are we writing this down?
Well, I'm writing notes.
You're
Yeah,
writing
But
notes,
all
yes.
right.
we are being taped, so
Okay.
anybody,
Now, building on that, when these 4 dwelling units are occurring on one lot, which could be considered, because the definition of subdivision is based on dwelling units, not on lots. This is quite an interesting experience for me. Does that mean that it automatically subdivides the lot? Or does the lot remain one lot with as many as 4 dwelling units on it being considered as a subdivision?
I think that would be more based on subdivision law, which I am certainly not an expert on, but happy to follow up on that question.
Because the concept of subdivision is you're dividing a lot, not just plunking down
Yeah, and
structures.
I think that the amendment to subdivision law 5-ish years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, to clarify that it was not necessarily, that subdivision statutes may not apply if you are only doing something internal to a structure, may at least clarify some of the confusion and may give you some flexibility depending on what you decide you want to write.
Because if you continue along this line that you could have multiple dwelling units on one lot, then you might find yourself in a situation where someone owns the dwelling unit but not the land on which it was built.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Isn't that the case with condos, though?
yeah, I was about to say, I did not look that far into your ordinance. I did try to
Well, you
look at
have
it.
to legally make a condo
Yeah.
agreement. If you're just doing plunk, 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 there are cases where people own structures but don't own the land. It's the quit rent system,
Right.
and that's a nightmare. And I don't think that the Maine legislature wants to go there.
I have a follow-up to D, if it's okay.
We
So-
work this out, so we go.
So just, you answered this question, but I want to re-clarify, because in the rules, under the dwelling unit allowance, B, and this could just be my incorrect interpretation of it, B1B says if a lot does not contain an existing dwelling unit and does not meet 1 or 2 above, meaning it's no central water or not in a growth area, designated growth area, a municipality must allow up to 2 dwelling units per lot located in an area which housing is allowed, provided that the requirements of 12 MRS 423 are met. Here's where I have the question. The 2 dwelling units may be one within one structure or 2 separate structures. So that permissive may applies to the municipality and not to whoever wants to do it, in other words. That's my question.
It's a great question. We copied that straight from statute in our rules, so my guess would be the intent of the legislature, which is always scary to guess their intent, was potentially a little bit of both. My recommendation would be write an ordinance that allows the lot owner to be able to create those, either the 2 units within a structure or 2 separate units, assuming that we're just talking about a zoning district that does not, a lot that's in a zoning district that doesn't have to do the remaining other 2 units.
Right.
Yep.
It's not a growth area.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
agree
Or-
with that.
Same thing, I guess the same principle.
Deb, I just want to introduce folks from Harrison here and myself.
Yep.
Can I just?
Go ahead.
Just an introduction. I'm Representative Walter Rice. I represent Bridgton, Harrison, and Denmark. I have 3 folks from Harrison here. Jamie, go ahead, Jamie.
Chair of Harrison Planning Board,
Jamie.
Colleen Densmore, co-chair, and Wendy Gallant.
Okay, and I think we have from Denmark, we have Tom Kerbine and Donna Dodge.
Yeah.
And I see select board chair back there and our CDAC chair back there. So just, Walter and a few of you didn't come in when we started the meeting. We're spending about the first half hour giving the Bridgton Planning Board a chance to ask questions, and then we're going to turn it over to everybody in the audience to ask questions, and we'll go back and forth till we've all exhausted ourselves. Okay? And thank you, Walter, for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yeah, just one clarification on this nice thing that you handed out last week. It says on land with 0 units, in other words, raw land, if outside of a growth area, you can have two dwelling units, and it has the phrase "if attached." So they have to be attached, they can't be detached, the two dwelling units.
I think that's something we're currently updating. That's not the case. They can be attached or detached.
Attached
Yeah.
or detached.
And I'll use that segue to share with both members of the board, if you don't have copies of our guidance document, and at least for a couple of the members of the audience, we do have our guidance document, which was updated before our final rules were adopted. So that may be one of the things that we're still working to finalize. And then we have a couple of copies of the final rule, but probably only enough for the planning board members that are sitting up here with us.
We actually have the final rule
Perfect.
in our OneDrive, shared drive, as well as the law statutes and as well as the guidance documents. So
Perfect.
feel free to give those to others.
We certainly have noticed that since the guidance document was created and we went through the rulemaking process, there are a few tweaks and minor things for clarification that came up during the public comment period, it was great to have additional eyes on the rule because frankly, Ben and I, you just came up with such good scenarios where we didn't think about it and said, oh, we really need to update this. So that was sort of one of those situations,
Sure.
so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a follow-up to, if it's okay, to Ken. So the same language is used for the accessory dwelling unit. It says may be detached or attached. I took that to mean that it's the choice, the law is giving whoever wants to do it the choice.
Yes, I would agree that LD 2003 in that sense is giving the owner of the parcel or the developer the ability to do to do either of those three choices, but that you would want to make sure that you craft your ordinance to allow those particular provisions.
Okay.
I do think the caveat might be, though, that if you had an accessory structure such as a shed or a garage, there is some wiggle room for municipalities to not allow an ADU in those specific structures.
Right.
I can look for the exact
Could you say that
statutory.
again?
Sure. So I think that the difference between what Ben just said, where we're talking about ADUs that are within detached or, what's the third category?
Within
Detached or,
Within
Attached?
within detached or,
attached and as a new structure.
or as an, okay, sorry. I think that the difference between that is that municipalities do have some control over whether they want to allow accessory dwelling units that are within an accessory structure, such as a shed or a garage. So we have heard some municipalities that don't want to allow a shed or a garage to be converted into an accessory dwelling unit.
And
Now, this is an accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
What
Right.
about converting a shed or garage into a dwelling unit? That would be, because I'm confused, and I think that when we talk about this, since we're talking about adding dwelling units to a lot, we click over into additional dwelling units, which I consider small, accessory to the primary unit, blah, 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 which has been around in Maine law for a long time, but most people haven't addressed it, or this board hasn't addressed it. But, so when you're talking about what you just said, it applies to ADU placement, not to these up to 4 structures on a particular lot, not to a dwelling unit, to an additional, a little one, not a big one.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Because I think people are having trouble differentiating between those things.
And
Yes.
Oh,
Go ahead, please.
I think that we heard feedback in the rulemaking process that our definition for dwelling unit, our definition for accessory dwelling unit didn't do a good enough job job differentiating between a dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit, because a lot of people view an accessory dwelling unit as something that's accessory or subordinate to a primary structure. So we felt as a way to sort of get around that, because we were using the definition of accessory dwelling unit that's provided in statute, we felt that municipalities have the discretion to create their own definition of accessory dwelling unit that better fits their own needs and better sort of explains their own, how they perceive the differences between a dwelling unit and an accessory dwelling unit.
And one of those primary differences would be that the accessory dwelling unit would have under statute, a minimum threshold, so it would be 190 square feet or larger. But you would have the ability as a board to have a maximum threshold if you would like on an accessory dwelling unit.
We're looking at a threshold that I think is, we were looking at a percentage, and then we topped it off at a certain number, which we assumed would be within a percentage range. But I've noticed a lot of municipalities have the top part is a percentage. You got somebody over here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just building on that, just add a question. Suppose you have a raw lot and you can put 2 primary dwelling units on it. Let's differentiate that from an ADU. Do both of the primary dwelling units have to have frontage on the road that the lot is on?
Yes. It would be, LD 2003 didn't change the provision to add the additional primary or principal dwelling unit. So whatever would have had to go on in the past still needs to be met. So the frontage requirements, the lot area requirements, any other dimensional requirements, those still need to be met for a principal dwelling unit, for the second full dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Going farther down that hypothetical, if it was a lot where you had a 1 acre lot area requirement and the parcel only had 1.5 acres, they would still be able to add an accessory dwelling unit because that accessory dwelling unit does not need to meet the lot area requirement.
Yeah, so that's the main difference between the two. The accessory dwelling unit can go to the side or behind the primary residence, and you don't need frontage for
Correct.
for an ADU.
You don't need frontage, or you don't need lot area requirements, and you do not need additional parking for the accessory dwelling unit.
But side dimensions would still apply, setbacks, excuse me.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Just a follow-up and then on that, so just to make it really simple for me. So if somebody has a lot and they have a dwelling unit on it, and the requirement is 100 foot of frontage for a lot to put a dwelling unit on it, and then they put another dwelling unit on it, it's a full dwelling unit, they then require 200 feet of frontage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Just as it's done today, before the LD 2003
Okay.
proportions come into
Thanks.
effect.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
All the dimensional requirements would be required, correct?
Right. That was one point I was confused on.
Yes, all the dimensional requirements would still be required for additional principal dwelling units. The one change that you may need to make, and I don't remember if you needed to make that or not, for your ordinances would be, as we mentioned way back 20 or 30 minutes ago, that the lot area requirement needs to be the same, or no more than. So if it's a 1 acre minimum, then it has to be a 1 acre minimum for the second dwelling unit, and so on and so forth.
Dee, and then Ralph, did you have any questions you haven't?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay. Go ahead, Dee.
This is a hypothetical. You're saying that this new arrangement accepts the dimensional requirements that municipalities have in their codes at this point. I'm not saying that I'm suggesting this, but I'm saying that people will perhaps think of this. Suppose in rewriting or adjusting, not rewriting, adjusting one's, a municipality's code to accept these requirements, the code the dimension requirements are changed so that the 100, that there's no road frontage, let's say, but then they put in road frontage. Would that then be considered by the powers that be as something deliberately done to be discriminatory? Or would that be thought of as something that the code writers need to do to bring order to their municipality?
I think that's an excellent question that Ben and I have been grappling with. For one, we do want municipalities to have control over this process and to, set lot area requirements and setback requirements and road frontage requirements that make sense for their own communities. However, we certainly wouldn't want to hear that communities are doing it to sort of like thwart the legislation. However, we can't say that you can't change those requirements at all.
And one of the things that I think LD 2003 gives communities a good chance to do is to really think about those requirements. I live in Bath, and we were actually just Deb, were you on the call this morning? You weren't on the call this morning.
No, I wasn't able to do it.
We've been doing weekly call-ins where folks can kind of ask questions like this, or more or less in the weeds, however much they want to get into the weeds with us. But I was sharing, we were talking about non-conforming lots, and I was sharing sort of that, I live in Bath. There are a lot of lots that are non-conforming in the sense that they no longer meet the lot area requirement. At some point they did. Maybe when zoning was created, or maybe not, but at some point we had a code that allowed a smaller lot size than it does today. This may be the opportunity to look at those districts and in communities that have designated areas like that, and to try to determine what a correct lot size should be. But that doesn't mean that you're required to do that. All that statute is requiring you to do is make sure that especially your lot area requirement is consistent. And similarly, that more likely than not, that you are crafting frontage requirements and setback requirements that do allow those new units to be placed on the lot, that you aren't saying, I'm going to create a 4,000 square foot lot and then have a 100-foot setback and make sure that no buildings can be placed here.
Right, okay. Because that does seem to me to be a real danger to particularly smaller communities that are attempting to maintain a certain order within their neighborhoods.
Yeah, and as Hillary mentioned, we've certainly started having conversations with communities that are trying to determine what makes sense. I would expect there would be different answers in different communities. The example I used, some communities may determine that it makes sense to lower the lot area requirement because that's how lots are constructed in that particular zoning district in that community. Others may have some of the same concerns that you're expressing and want to make sure that you increase the lot area from an acre to an acre and a half or something different than that. And you're well within your right to be able to still pick those numbers as long as they're consistent.
So there may well still be within one municipality's zoning standards that might seem exclusionary in one community, but would not necessarily be exclusionary in another.
I think that's a fair way to put it. I think that across communities there'll be different standards.
Thank you.
So we're at about, we've gone a good 30 minutes with the Bridgton board, so I
I think maybe this is a good time to turn it over to the other two boards and our guests. And I thank the Harrison and Denmark boards for coming, as well as the others in the audience. Appreciate it. So we have a mic somewhere. Where did it, oh, yeah. So what I'd suggest is, instead of going to the podium, which could get a little cumbersome, is just, once Ben or Hillary recognizes you, someone will get you a mic. And we'll go from there. And
Yep. Bob? Or Tori?
Testing 1, 2.
oh, you want-
Might need some technical assistance out here.
Thank you. I can talk very loudly. I'm a teacher.
Oh, I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I live on a 2-acre lot, and all my immediate neighbors are about 2 acres also. So my big concern would be that we have 4 dwelling units on a 2-acre lot. Water pollution, well pollution and septic requirements. I would assume that the planning board would not allow 4 dwelling units on a 2-acre lot. With that, how does that work?
I could give one quick clarification. So I think you're probably in the rural neighborhood?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not a growth area. So that would be, your question still stands, but just for your information, that would be up to 2 dwelling units on a lot, not 4.
And they have to have the same frontage.
Okay.
Yep. But go ahead.
Or 1 ADU,
Or what, can you
Or
tell us what that is?
an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, is that like an in-law apartment?
Exactly, that is the common
Okay.
other term to use for accessory dwelling unit, yes.
And then what if there's a covenant on the property that states that it cannot be subdivided?
All covenants and deed restrictions would still apply.
Okay, thanks.
That's not subdividing though. That'd be your next question. My next question to follow, that wouldn't be subdividing. Under this rule,
That's correct. It most likely would not be subdividing, but I would recommend just looking at the covenant and determining what exactly the language is, and whether it talks about subdividing or dwelling units or other components.
yeah, yeah.
I think so.
So, hello, is this something, does it really work?
It would be
Just for the other
helpful
folks
just
that- what's that?
just for knowledge, if you guys just identify yourself quickly by name,
We'll
so
do
we
that.
know.
I wanted to start with these folks, because I'm not sure everybody on our planning board in Harrison knows who these folks are. So if you could just quickly, oh, you have my.
Well, we did do that, but,
Well, I don't.
We're happy to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
so go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
Well, these guys, these folks here that are experts, they're the genius of LD 2003 and all the other stuff that goes with it. And it's not their fault if the answers aren't all there yet, they're still working on it. But I really want to commend the Bridgton Planning Board and you folks for being here tonight. And I'm so pleased to see the Harrison folks here. And based on that, we'll go around and do intros again. I represent Walter Eisen from District 83, so I basically represent everybody here in this room as your state representative.
Jamie Dayton, Chair of the Harrison Planning Board. So, did I understand you correctly that all covenants that pre-exist on a particular lot, those would all still be intact?
Right.
Hello, my name is Wendy Gallant. I'm in Harrison, and I'm on Harrison Planning Board. I don't have any questions at this time, but thank you for doing all that you all do. Housing is just so imperative right now. It's crazy. My own daughter right now is facing homelessness in the next 30 days. I'd like to think I'm a pretty resourceful, diligent person, and I'm not able to find her an apartment. And I also myself own an apartment house, but you don't necessarily want your kids living with you, especially if you charge them rent. It doesn't really work that good. So thank you for doing what you do.
Hi, my name's Colleen Densmore. I'm the vice chair of the planning board in Harrison. I do have one question. I just like definition of growth area. Is that a zoning restriction within towns? What's the definition? Can you define growth area for me, please?
Yes, I can do that. So we have the definition provided in our rule, but I'm happy to read it out to you. This is also the definition that is used in statute.
Okay.
Good night, you, Carl. I'm happy to read it off to you.
Yeah, and-
If you have anything else you want to add, I'm happy to. So this is the definition that we use. Is that in this booklet?
No, it's not in that booklet, unfortunately.
So
Go ahead.
I'll read it off, and Ben and Carl can add anything that they would like to add. So we have designated growth area means an area that is designated in a municipality's or multi-municipal region's comprehensive plan as suitable for orderly residential, commercial, or industrial development, or any combination of those types of development, and into which most development projected over 10 years is directed. There also are a few other definitions in communities that don't have comprehensive plans, but if you do have a comprehensive plan, then that would be the definition that would apply to your community. Does Harrison have a comprehensive plan? Or
We have an antique one. We do have one. It is, it's not up to date.
Yeah, and so we did actually have a lot of conversation as we were drafting the final rules about should this be applicable to a designated growth area in a comp plan that, you know, hasn't been reviewed by the state in more than the normal time period, so 20 years, 30 years, something like that. It is for a designated growth area that has a comp plan that has a consistency finding, which would mean that if you do not have a consistency finding, those portions may not be applicable to you, and we would definitely recommend that you, if you so choose, that you move forward and try to work to get a consistent comp plan as well, because it may help you try to determine how LD 2003 impacts those particular zoning districts.
Thank you.
I'm Donna Dodge on the planning board in Denmark. I don't have any questions right this minute, but I may as it goes on.
I'm Tom Carabine, chair of the planning board in Denmark. We have a comprehensive plan, but we don't have designated growth area or anything like that at all. Are we exempted then from 4 dwelling units on a lot?
I guess I would have a follow-up question. Do you use a different term instead of designated growth area? We know that some communities use something like priority development areas.
No, we don't have anything at all like that.
How old's your comprehensive?
3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
Without a you have a future land use plan?
Yes.
Required?
Yeah.
I'd have to look at it to see what it says.
All right.
My
name's Carl Epic. I'm the municipal planning assistance program in the state, and I'm still learning this stuff.
Okay.
I would agree with that, and we're happy, or Carl's happy, to look at these documents to determine which parts of LD 2003 would apply or might apply to your community.
Hi, I'm Carmen Lone. I'm the chairman of the select board. So traditionally, it's been my understanding that a comprehensive plan is a guidance tool and not an ordinance. So definitions or requirements like this are actually making the comprehensive plan an ordinance instead of a guidance tool. So if we have a land use ordinance that meets all these criteria, will that override the comp plan?
I think there are multiple ways to answer that. I think the gist of probably where the hope would be if you have a consistency finding on your comp plan would be that the future land use provisions of the comp plan would be dictating where you're going with the with your local ordinances, but they are different. It's meant to be a visioning document to build on ordinances. So we actually were having this conversation as Hillary and I started rulemaking at the beginning of this process a couple months ago of what does it mean for communities that have that have already done a comp plan, have a consistent comp plan, but yet you have to go through the provisions of LD 2003. Our recommendation would be to adopt, if you have a designated growth area, adopt those, whatever ordinances you need to adopt locally. And then whenever you're back redoing a comp plan, whether, even if it's in 10 or 12 years, if you've just re-upped it, then we would recommend to have those conversations and to try to align your future land use planning with what is in your local what's in your local ordinances and what's on state statute at that point. And I know that's a confusing way to answer it, but I think that's probably the easiest way to try to retain consistency of your comp plan while applying what you need to apply for LD 2003, and then sort of playing catch up. And feel free to tell me if you want something different for your process.
Again, I'm still learning. I think that's accurate. And if you do find some place where it's in conflict or your comprehensive plan, what you want to do with.
Can you share the mic, please?
Oh, sorry, yeah, of course. Sorry. Where you want to make change. Press it.
Press it low.
There it is. Where your ordinances are in conflict or contradictory, you want to do some type of update there, you might need to revisit the comprehensive plan from an amendment standpoint. But we're hoping that there's not a lot of need for that, and we don't think there will be.
And to our previous conversation about how you are creating the district requirements, whether it's now or somewhere in the next 10 or 12 years, LD 2003 kind of may give you the opportunity to think about those particular portions. So I know we've had conversations in multiple state agencies about what exactly is comp planning, how are communities abiding by the Growth Management Act, and what do you do if you're a community that has determined you want a comp plan, but you may not know where your designated growth area is, or it's just something you continue to check off the same district year every 10 years, but you don't actually think about what it means. Hopefully these processes and some grant funds from the state and other components will allow for some good conversations with your residents, so you can determine, should that designated growth area be in that particular zoning district? Is that where you want the growth to actually happen? And I know that that is a challenging thing to wrap your head around, and comp planning is not always the most fun or most exciting thing to do, but it is definitely useful as you're thinking about what is mandated under LD 2003 and where you may want to go if you have an update coming up, or where you may want to go if you don't have an update coming up, but you'll have to do something in 10 years.
So as we're weeding through appeals and getting judgment passed over whether or not the board's decisions are appropriate or legal, which document is going to be the overriding document? Is the land use document going to be the overriding document, or is the comprehensive plan now going to become a go-to for legal arguments?
Under LD 2003, statute would be preempting your local law, but there is definitely a gray area between whether that is, whether if your comp plan says something different, how that interacts with each other. My assumption would be, I think most of the communities that are represented in the room have a comp plan, so more likely than not, what zoning you have on the books is already it already interacts well with the comp plan. You're already saying we want housing in a particular location because the comp plan says so. So it theoretically shouldn't be changing that relationship today, but that relationship may change in the future, and you may want to think about what that means if there's greater density that is being required by state statute.
Kevin Renee, Bridgton. Last Wednesday's session that you all gave was very instructive, very helpful, and glad to see you're doing it again tonight. There's lots of us to pick up on, so glad to see you here. What are you doing next Wednesday?
Coming up.
Okay, that's nice. Last week, for the last week, when you folks were up there, the question that came to me from the audience was, we have a deadline of, is it July 31st or July 1st?
First.
July 1st to accomplish what's in LD 2003, which I think everybody here would agree, even these folks, it's really not tenable at this point. The latest news out of the Housing Subcommittee as of today is there will be legislation that comes out of committee that's going to extend the date 1 year for any town that has a town meeting government. So it should take a little bit of the pressure off. The second thing that's happening is these folks are still writing rules for grants, and when those rules are formulated, then towns will be able to apply for grants to help in this process. It's very time-consuming. Yes?
Yeah, this question probably is for you, Walter, and not these folks.
But
Why
give him the
is
mic.
it a grant situation when this is a mandate coming down to municipalities? And mandates, if they have a cost effect, are supposed to be funded, but now you're making us to apply for grants to get help? Why?
So we're happy to answer that. So
I want Walter to.
I can answer it so they can follow it up. There's two pieces. There's grant money available, which you can apply for to help you. Additionally, if it is deemed a mandate, the state is required to fund 90% of the mandate. Now, whether this has been officially described as a mandate, I'm not sure that's come out yet. But I will be with you that if there's going to be costs involved here for all you folks to comply with this, that's a mandate.
I've already spent $15,000 of taxpayer money, so I will. Hero over here, worship, put you up on a pedestal if you go there and you fight for us, because it is an unfunded mandate. Unless making us to apply for a grant is not right. So whatever you can do, Walter.
Yeah, I think they might have the DECD folks might have at least an update on the funding.
yeah, we've been hard at work trying to determine how to best spend the funds that the legislature did grant to us. We are glad to say, regardless of whether it is a grant or a mandate, there is a relatively substantial amount of money that has been put into the Housing Opportunity Program, which feels really nice. However this process works, it will be nice to be able to back up having communities adopt these provisions with additional monies to help you do that. We do have funding in both the budget that is ongoing right now and is quickly coming to an end, as well as the budget cycle that will start on July 1st. And we have the ability to roll over the funds because we have not spent any currently. So we do have just about, we have right around $2.5 million to be spent for municipalities to be able to have either grants or to have some other form of cost. We've been working diligently with anyone from the Attorney General's office to different, some of the accounting and controller folks through different levers of state government to make sure that we do understand if it is a mandate or if it is not. We don't have clarification on that quite yet and how those funds will be dispersed, but we do have a lot of money to give to communities. A lot of that is going to go to help cover the cost of the ordinance updates, the legal fees, things like the workshop that we're here tonight. But we do expect to have additional funds available at some point that would also go to kind of the second phase, which would be community conversations, charrettes, maybe a conversation about your designated growth area if that's something you want to talk about where you need to determine if it's correct. But more information on that to come, hopefully in the very near future.
So what I'm hearing, I'm pretty loud.
I know you're loud. It's a requirement.
It's a requirement. So what I'm hearing is there is some money set aside, and when you look at how many municipalities there are in the state of Maine, you divide that into that amount, that pot. It's really not very much money at all, but we don't have a way to access it yet. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're still working with the AG's office on how we need to statutorily get these funds out. So more to
Okay.
come soon.
So everyone who, it'll be available to everybody. It's not like a first come, first serve. It's not like a contest of some sort.
I can't speak to that at this time, but we just need AG guidance before we can say exactly how much funding we have, what municipalities are eligible, things like that. So we'll have more information to come, but
Yeah, I guess my question would be, why wouldn't all municipalities be eligible to get it? Because it affects every one of us.
We can't answer that at this
I know
moment,
that,
but
but
we're happy to
those are
provide
the questions I get.
Absolutely,
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
we understand that. We actually just had a meeting literally just before this. One of the reasons why Hillary and I were running in the door was we were on a meeting with multiple of those folks to try to determine those answers, which we're hoping to have an answer very quickly because we do want to get funds out as soon as we can.
So my chair asked me a question now. We've already spent, I think it's between $15,000 and $20,000.
But we've spent, well, that I'm aware of, 15.
Yeah, 15. So will it be retroactive, or are my taxpayers just out that money?
We answered this sort of last week. It won't feel retroactive to your treasurer or whoever counts the funds, because my guess is we won't get funds out during this fiscal year. So if you have spent funds in the fiscal year that ends June 30th, if you're a community that has a fiscal year that ends June 30th,
yeah,
that money is spent. We probably aren't giving you additional funds before then, but we will be giving funds to cover the costs of ordinance work and other provisions. We just don't know what that
the
will look like.
consideration was the fact that this was going to take effect July 1, so we had to talk to an attorney. I mean, we have complex ordinances, so.
So if I understand what you said, Ben, because this is the way I understood it last week, is we could get, quote, reimbursed is probably the wrong word, but we could get reimbursed for that. However, it's not going to roll to the same financial year. Again, depending on how all the rules work out in the end, but the idea would be that we could recover that money, but it wouldn't line up with our financial year.
I didn't hear that.
Well, that's why I'm asking for clarification.
Yeah. Funds, I would assume that we will be very hard pressed to get checks out the door before June 30th. So if you've spent funds during this fiscal year, or if you're a community that has a fiscal year that's July 1st to June 30th, then those funds are spent. We will be giving funds of some amount in some process at some point soon. I'm knowing that it's mid-May, I am very doubtful that it'll be in the next 6 weeks. So that's the one caveat, is it won't be retroactive in the sense that it goes right into your general fund on June 29th, so that you've spent $0 during this fiscal year, if that makes any sense.
I just want to thank Walter from last week. We raised the question of deadlines, and you addressed the question of deadlines. Thank you.
I'm wondering if Tori, our community development director.
No, that actually was my one question that you just answered. Thank you. I will introduce myself if this works. I'm Tori Hill. I'm the Community Development Director here for the town of Bridgton. So thank you for all of the Q&As that you've been doing, and thank you for coming here. Appreciate it.
We're glad to be here.
Who else out there in the gang of planning board members and select board members and others? Anybody else have questions?
Just clarification on what the monies can be put towards. You'd said ordinance updates, legal fees, community conversations. In a small town like ours, we don't have a lot of staff. We don't have money for staff. These sort of things, especially with our, outdated comp plan and all of that, it's not that we don't want to be up to snuff. We just don't have the money to pay another person. Can the grant monies go to contracting or hiring staff to do land use and LD 2003? And can it go, is there a limit as to what the money can be spent on?
The short answer is yes, but the answer to your first question could also be yes. So the money would need to be spent for, I don't have what we put in our final rules for the grant in front of me, but it was housing-related activities, ordinance work, other components related to either LD 2003 or applicable housing, development of housing plans. So you could probably spend the funds to hire a consultant or to hire a private firm or the regional planning organization to help you with drafting those ordinances. Our funds would be limited in the sense that it would not be able to support a staff person in perpetuity to make those amendments. It would be a one-time, we've made the amendments for LD 2003 and it costs X amount of dollars, not a 30,
Sure.
if that makes any sense.
That's
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the tax, I guess would be the way to put it, our LPI is suggesting to the town of Harrison that the ADU, if it is a separate structure, be sprinkled. If it is an attached structure, both structures have to be sprinkled. Is that something anybody else has been talking about?
Could you just repeat that again? The sprinkling requirement?
For health and safety, they're saying that the independent structure, ADU, the ADU, in other words, it's standing alone on the property because there's enough room, would be sprinkled, and that if it's attached to the primary building, then both buildings have to be sprinkled.
I don't know enough about fire codes to be much more than sort of dangerous, but one question I would have would be is, are they requiring a new principal structure to be sprinklered, or are they only requiring the accessory dwelling unit to be sprinkled?
If it's detached, they both have to be sprinkled.
No.
If they were building a single.
If they're detached, only the ADU has to be sprinkled.
Okay, so if it was two principal units or even just a single family home, a question I would have would be, does it need to be sprinkled?
Hey, Dee and Kathy, I can't hear.
Sorry, thank you.
My fault. Kathy is blameless.
Sorry. But there's nothing in statute that would change what they may or may not be using already for either state fire code or any local codes that you've adopted. And I don't know your local code at all, and I don't know state fire code well enough to be able to get really far in the weeds with that.
Mr. Madsen has a comment.
If you have a new principal dwelling developed on a lot in Harrison, does it need to be sprinkled?
No.
I would check.
With,
code.
I think this is just my opinion only, you could run the risk of appearing to be singling out the ADUs and the dwelling allowance, and I'm not sure that that would fly legally. Somebody might claim that's nice way to put it, unfair. Because you really have, say you have 80,000 square feet, say you have a 2-acre lot, then you only require 1 acre per dwelling unit. So you're gonna have a dwelling on each, a dwelling per acre,
Yeah, that
and
would,
yet
then it wouldn't be, that would not be applicable. We're talking
but what
about-
if one of them's your additional dwelling unit?
If you're in a, we have a village district, which is builder lots, builder 1-acre lots that are small, and those are the lots that he's concerned about for health and safety, and that's why he wanted them sprinkled.
Yeah. I mean, the little bit I know about fire code is that's certainly
Oh, that's all.
a good bit stricter. Dee, we'll come back to our board. I just want to make sure everybody back there in the audience gets a chance.
I just have one question. Can you clarify, somebody earlier had asked about, I think it was the lady leaving, she was concerned about 4 dwellings on a buildable lot. You said that it would only be 2 in her district, or whatever. She lived in a rural district. Denmark doesn't have a growth, or we don't have a growth district or anything like that. We have rural, we have shoreland, resource protected. Would this 2003 force Denmark to put 4 dwellings? I mean, can you just clarify how that's going to move forward?
Likely not. Ben and I are happy to review your comprehensive plan to make sure, but likely the answer would be no. But the ADU, or accessory dwelling unit provision of LD 2003 would still apply to Denmark, as well as the provisions of the up to 4 dwelling unit section that discuss adding 2 dwelling units to either a lot without an existing dwelling unit or to a lot with an existing dwelling unit. So it sounds like in Denmark, development could be limited just based on the fact that you likely don't have designated growth areas or access to public water or sewer or some comparable type of system.
Right. So you're
But
saying
we can
that-
double check that for you if you would
Okay.
like.
So you're saying that it would be limited to 2 per buildable lot? Is that what I'm hearing? Because of that lack of growth?
2 to 3, it depends on if there's an existing unit already on the lot or not, but the up to 4 provisions likely would not apply to you. Community, to your community.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. I'll try this and see if that does help.
It's not working.
I don't, oh, look at that. Just have to give it the old hammer try. I want to know if you could explain to some of the folks out here what the resources are that are low cost or no cost to towns to be able to develop the types of information that you're looking for. I know, for example, when you talk about AvCog, or you're talking about Greater Council, Portland Council of Governments, or you folks, or this gentleman over here, who do these folks talk to get help trying to start to develop the process?
I think generally speaking, coming to us is the most cost-effective option because we are not charging communities to provide our technical assistance. So that's sort of number one. Also, there are regional planning organizations that do provide services. However, I can't speak for them specifically. They may be able to provide sort of limited assistance without cost. I know that a lot of them have required dues for communities to be part of their services, so that's something to inquire about if you're not already a member of their organization. And then there's also, which is the highest, probably the highest end would be speaking to legal counsel about your ordinances. But if you're looking for low-cost options, it's us. You're stuck with us, so.
Hillary, could you forward I think, just the other regional organizations to make, maybe as a follow-up? I know there's a Southern Maine something, and of course GPCOG, and any others you know of.
Sure.
Yeah, we're happy to do that. I think I always get confused when we're over here because this area is kind of a line between some of the planning organizations, but I think most of you in the room would potentially be a member of GPCOG There may be a community that's in here that may be part of SMPDC or AVCOG as well. That line always gets really fuzzy for me. It's right here where the changeover is, so.
Denmark's in Oxford County, I believe that would be AVCOG. Harrison and Bridgton are both in Cumberland. So you're our first go-to, is that correct?
We will gladly be the first line of defense, yes.
So Harrison Planning Board, call them up, get them here. Let's.
And I'll use the bully pulpit, well, the almost bully pulpit, to kind of give a update on the other funds that we have. We've only talked about funding we have for municipalities. We also have funding from the legislature for service providers. So if you call up your Council of Governments or your regional planning organization today, they may be telling you, they may ask you if you're a dues paying member community. If you aren't, they may say that they may or may not have capacity to help you, or they may give you a specific charge on what it costs to talk to them. We do have funding that would be something that will be coming out probably towards the second half of the year of this calendar year, so somewhere in the fall, that would help the service providers, a regional planning organization, a council of governments, maybe even a private planning firm or others to have some of that capacity. So we'll have an ability for them to get grant funding to assist communities like the folks that are in this room, both on ordinance work, so related to LD 2003, but also on other provisions. I know we've had some conversations with GPCOG about stuff they want to do for member communities that may have already gone through processes of LD 2003. They may already have something similar on the books, so they want to do the next step. They want to understand where housing should or shouldn't be and do a very detailed mapping analysis, or they want to do whatever the next step is once you've adopted these provisions and try to understand how to take LD 2003 and ensure that development is occurring where you want it to occur. So we'll have that funding that'll go out to service providers later this year, and my guess is they would probably be really able to have that capacity somewhere towards the beginning of 2024.
Okay, so it's 6:30. Why don't we get one last question from the audience and then just break for food?
Just because we're on that now.
Yeah.
In Denmark, we are, we're a member of the Southern Maine Planning, and I've had conversations with them. They're happy to help us out, but they're completely overwhelmed. But my question is, if you have money for them or grant money for them, could they designate it for Denmark, or is it carte blanche for everything they do?
We have not released an RFA yet, but we are. We've had a lot of internal conversations, and probably both for our ease and our tracking mechanisms, but also to make sure that we know that you are receiving services. We would be asking in the RFA that a service provider gives us a letter of intent from a community. They wouldn't necessarily have to be a member community, but that they say that I'm a community that wants to work with this particular service provider to do this particular project that they're applying for the grant funds for.
Good time to break for break?
Okay.
Are our guests going to remain after the break for food?
Yes, so we'll get
okay.
to everybody's questions, at least up until a little bit before 8 o'clock. I think we're ready to come back.
I don't.
Been a great session so far, I think. So we're going to go back to the Bridgton board for their questions, and then I think we'll just open it up to whoever still has questions. And maybe we go back to the Bridgton board for about 20 minutes, and we'll just open it up to anybody who has questions in the room. Okay?
Well, I have a question.
She's first in the queue, then Ken, and I'm going to, from here, after those two, Ben gets to
All right.
do the honors.
I'm trying to eat cookies, so I'll be sweeter. Consistency finding. sounds great coming out of your mouth, and everyone's nodding because it's reasonable. Consistent to what? Who does the finding, and where do you get one?
Those are all great questions. So it's related to a comp plan, and the comprehensive planning is something that is designated under the Growth Management Act. The DACF is the body that reviews comp plans, and it's a couple of individuals within DACF. They review comp plans. There are, don't quote me on this, but how many different, 8, 10, 13 different components that you have to have in a comp plan.
Yeah, have to is the kind of the funny area.
Yeah.
There's only a few that are absolutely required, but they want you. It's not actually true. There are 13 that are required, but going in depth in them is probably a few. One of those is the future land use plan.
So you compare the comp plan to the required and see if it matches. Or it lives up to the requirements. Contains the necessary information.
The requirements for what?
Are you asking about the consistency component?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then you might need a mic, Carl, right? I think as an adjunct to what Dee's asking, what Carl is tonight. So our comp plan went through a review process by the state. Our zoning was implemented after that. What I don't know is that our land use code get compared by the state to our existing comp plan. And is that, so kind of a second question is, if you write your comp plan and you don't have any zoning, when you write the zoning, who does the comparison to make sure they are congruent?
Between the comprehensive plan and your zoning.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, there isn't, after the comprehensive plan is, let's just assume you do a comprehensive plan that is deemed consistent. That's just a requirement that we have so that if other departments in other areas are wanting to know, sometimes it's a requirement to have a consistent comprehensive plan to get grants, for example, or certain things from other state governments. That's when we check on things. We're not in the business of checking your zoning to make sure it's consistent with, there's 3 of us. Soon it might be 5, but that's really something that would be challenged by somebody who's applying, or somebody who wants to do something, get a permit, building permit, and they say, hey, your comprehensive plan and your zoning are in conflict. And then that would be solved, I believe, through more of a, can ultimately get a legal process. Did I answer your question, though, too, about?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
Consistency of a comprehensive plan is that's what happens within the Municipal Planning Assistance Program, overseeing the growth management. But that's, one and done. Once we make the determination you have a consistent plan, then it's good.
Does this happen with every plan is measured and
It's reviewed for consistency.
reviewed?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then a determination is made.
Okay, another question for Hillary. When you read about the growth management, basically, a growth management area is an area that has been designated for growth, which is not really a definition. Growth, and then you said several, either industrial, whatever. If it is solely for industrial growth, then these housing things would not be applicable, would they?
I think it depends on if the district that you're,
Or I don't mean industrial, commercial growth, let's say that.
I think it would just depend on if you had a district that allows mixed use. Because there are some, essentially LD 2003 is saying in any area where housing is permitted, so it's not necessarily just solely residential areas. It could be districts that allow other uses as well.
All right. But by definition, if it's growth area, would the code standards allow for higher density, obviously you wouldn't look at a low-density area and say this is a designated growth area, right? Growth means more.
Yeah, you may or may not have designated that growth area to be the area. Your codes may or may not adequately reflect that you have designated that as a growth area. And I think this board is seemingly well-versed in what your provisions of your districts do or don't state. And I know the copy of the proposed amendments that we were sent started to kind of think about any changes to those district regulations that you may want to make. So I think you, as a board, are setting yourselves up well to determine what the district standards are within your designated growth area and determine if those are adequate and appropriate. But in general, a community could have district regulations that may technically limit growth, even if it is a designated growth area.
So it doesn't necessarily have to have high density, nor does it actually have to invite growth, because you said a growth area can limit growth. Doesn't that seem to be a little oxymoronic?
You can limit growth in the sense that that you have a larger lot area requirement or other provisions, but
Gotcha.
under LD 2003, if it is a designated growth area, you would need to comply with the up to 4-unit provision and the affordable housing bonus provision.
I see. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to get you, and I didn't get you.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, the comprehensive plan, of course, is checked for consistency. After we update our ordinances to try to be congruent with LD 2003 and its amendments, will the state do any correction, or are we entirely dependent upon town attorneys to make sure that we've done the proper?
I think that Ben and I are happy to look over ordinances with the caveat it's just the two of us. But as far as any enforcement mechanism goes, or sort of a similar structure as comprehensive planning, we don't have statutory authority to do that. So there wouldn't be any repercussions coming from us if we felt that something in your ordinance wasn't consistent with the requirements listed in LD 2003.
So just to make sure everything should be checked by town attorneys.
That's what we've been recommending to towns.
Yes, certainly, I think we would welcome you looking at a draft or some sort of summary of proposals where we end up, because just your knowledge of planning and what we're trying to do. So we get to that. Okay. Who else has questions?
For parking, we can't require any parking for ADUs, correct?
Not additional.
Yes, the ADU should not have any additional parking. It would just be what the principal structure is requiring.
If the criteria for parking was, let's say, based on number of bedrooms, I'm just using instead of the principal dwelling, would that make a difference?
You would still want to make sure that that an ordinance you write for an accessory dwelling unit does not require additional parking for the accessory dwelling unit. But you certainly can choose whatever parking standard you would like for the principal for the single-family dwelling unit.
Okay.
I think you were calling on folks.
Well, I'm trying to give it to you. Seems like I can see some people and can't. If you have somebody wants to build on a lot that is less than the state requirement for septic and well, which I think is like 20,000 square feet, they can get, depending on the town, they they can get a variance from the local plumbing inspector, correct? So my question is, how does that interact with LD 2003 if the local plumbing inspector is allowed to give variances to lot size to allow housing? Does that mean that, for instance, somebody, say you need 20,000 square feet per, right? And you have a 35,000 square foot lot, and you want to put 2 dwelling units on it, but neither of them, but it would only meet it for 1 dwelling unit. Could somebody then say, I'm doing the additional dwelling unit allowance, and I want an LPI for those 2 homes on that area, assume septics. And could they get that? So they'd be shy by whatever, 3,000 feet per home. How does, I know that's kind of a legalistic question, but when I think about this, I think that you could have some unintended consequences with people claiming if they can get an LPI for a home on a lot that's too small, why can't they get an LPI for 2 homes on a lot that's too small because of LD 2003?
The variance process was not amended under LD 2003, so whoever is granting those variances, whether it's a code enforcement officer, a board of appeals, or a ZBA, or both, however that process works in your own individual municipality still exists in the same way it did prior to LD 2003. And to those same provisions, the same amount of hardship needs to be shown from the lot or the parcel owner that is saying, I need a variance because X, Y, and Z. So whoever is the authority that reviews those still needs to make that same determination that they should be granted the variance due to a particular hardship. I know that doesn't fully answer your question, but my guess would be it would end up running, it would be the same questions that they would be asking that authority, and they would have potentially the same answer. If there could be hardship based on statute, then that may be an applicable variance. If there is not hardship under definitions that you use locally, then that may not be something that's a variance.
Okay, so if somebody could prove hardship for both of those to end up on too small of a lot area, I guess the potential is yes.
I feel like just like every other gray area, the potential is always potentially maybe yes, with lots of maybes. But I think that the key point to take away would be that the same provisions are still applicable. So whoever's reviewing those still has the ability to make the same determination as to whether there is undue hardship on that particular lot.
Okay, all right. You do it.
So are you cool with going on to that?
Absolutely cool.
Okay. So we are, before we do that, do any board members have any final questions before we shift gears to kind of popcorning? Okay. So we will open it back up to the audience. So if anybody wants to speak, the microphone will be passed around.
I'm pretty loud.
I think we still want to get it recorded on the recording with the microphones.
Okay. My question is, so for an existing 3-bedroom home, if you were to combine something within that structure to make an in-law, so to speak, it would be still considered an accessory dwelling unit?
Yes, most likely.
Okay. And so contained within that same house, I still only have 3 bedrooms. Now I put on, instead of doing it within the house, I put on an addition, so I still have my 3 bedrooms in my home, but now I have a 4th one over here in the accessory dwelling unit because I did an addition rather than splitting what I have. I need to change my septic to add that fourth bedroom to be in compliance with plumbing. Is that correct?
So
You're gonna just let me add a fourth bedroom without expanding my private septic?
I was making sure that we had put this in rule, but yes, we did capture this in rule. So regardless of whether that additional dwelling unit is a new principal structure or an accessory dwelling unit, if there are new dwelling units being added that have new bedrooms, then a septic system needs to have the same calculation to match whatever those new bedroom, whatever that new mathematical equation is.
Thank you.
Don't be shy.
Just Colleen Button.
I haven't read the entire document, so I probably have 1,000 more questions, I just don't have them yet.
I do, about the, can we ask for?
Oh,
Bob, that's a question.
I got to follow up on Ken's question about parking. So you can't make a requirement that there be adequate parking. Right?
Well, I think it depends on which portion of LD 2003 you're talking about.
Well, grab the one that excludes parking then.
So for the ADU section, no additional parking requirements can be added when you add an ADU. Only what's currently stands for the single-family unit.
So where do they park?
Right.
That's what the law says, so we are stuck with that, but we know that communities are sort of grappling with what that could potentially mean.
Okay, so that one's still in the pipeline then, because particularly, in concentrated areas like this you're in right now, that can be a real problem if we are having a bunch of additional units but not required to have parking for them.
I do say it could be a deterrent to people who are interested in having an ADU, but maybe they think that parking might be an issue and maybe they won't build it. It's hard to know, but.
And you do have the ability still, just like you did before LD 2003 was enacted, to determine parking calcs that make sense for single-family homes and for other dwelling units that are not accessory. And you do have the ability to think about setback requirements and yard area requirements, or however you whatever you have in your ordinance that allows someone to build on a lot.
Okay, so pretty much the lot owner would have to figure that out, but we couldn't deny it because there's not adequate parking.
Yes, you cannot deny an ADU because there is, because you don't deem that there's.
You're looking into it further because it can be a real problem in concentrated areas where you just don't have.
Well, we are stuck with the statutory language as of right now, unless there were a bill that were to change that. So it is certainly something that communities and individual lot owners might need to grapple with.
Yeah, and I don't know, this is probably a philosophical thing, but is there any taking into account the effect on the value of surrounding properties? Now, take for instance, I have almost an acre lot in town. None of my neighbors have that same situation, and I develop it to its maximum based on this current law. That can negatively affect the property value of my neighbors because it comes from, you have a certain neighborhood situation and now you have additional houses. So instead of looking out your back window and seeing my gardens, you're looking at other houses plus the noise and everything else. So that does or can impact value.
With additional buildings, there definitely will be a change in assessed value and market value of lots. It's hard to know whether that would be something that would be appreciative or not. I know that we kind of had, you asked a similar question last week. One of the things that we're hoping to do is not necessarily value per dwelling unit, but to do a better job of tracking and understanding changes throughout different regions throughout the state of new dwelling units. My guess is, if you ask an assessor, that value is positive. So you have a new structure on your lot, you have a new dwelling on your lot, it's going to be taxed higher, so it's a positive value, not a negative value.
On that particular lot, because you tax on what's called highest and best use. And if your highest and best use is like my lot having 3 more homes on it, but that has the opposite effect for my neighbors. And you know, we'll have to see how it plays out, but you know, my background for 20 years was a real estate appraiser, so I'll be curious to see how that tracks, because it could be a two-edged sword. So, my 2 cents.
Just clarification, this LD 2003, it's only applicable to growth management areas?
I think it depends on which provision of LD, or which statute of LD 2003 you're referring to. So it sounds like in your community, you might not have designated growth areas. Okay, so in that case, most likely the up to 4 dwelling unit section could apply to you, with the caveat that you likely wouldn't have to have 4 dwelling units on one lot. And then the ADU section would apply to your community as well.
It would.
Yes.
But we would not have to have 4 dwelling units on one lot?
No, most likely no. It sounds like if you don't have designated growth areas, that would be the case.
We kicked off the night kind of doing a really abridged version of a presentation that we do where we talk about the different statutes. We generally refer to them as buckets because it seems to be easier to think about them in different manners. Generally speaking, the accessory dwelling unit statute is applicable to any community that has zoning and potentially communities that do not have zoning. The multiple dwellings on a lot provision, the maximum would be 4 units. That's in a designated growth area. If you don't have a designated growth area, that district would have to have, you would have to allow that district to have up to 2 or 3 units, depending on whether there's something existing on the lot or not, which means you would need to update your zoning code to allow for up to 3 units on individual lots. And then the last bucket or the last statute in LD 2003 is related to affordable housing developments, and that would only be applicable in a zoning district that's in a designated growth area.
But we're happy to sit down with you further to sort of hash this out in a way that
We
makes
have
more
your
sense.
card, we believe that we should call you.
We know that sometimes
We'll be in touch.
Ben and I sort of talk in hypotheticals, or like, well, maybe this applies to you, but sometimes we find it's much easier to, if we've taken a look at your documents that you already have and sort of say, okay, now this makes sense, this applies, this doesn't apply, here's what you should think about, so.
Yes, we should think about inviting you.
No pressure, no pressure.
Thank you.
Do you have a question, Deb?
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Okay.
So so for an individual residential dwelling, I believe you can only have 1 driveway opening now. Like, you can't do these curved driveways and all of that. So if somebody has and I don't know if you're familiar enough with the law, but if somebody has an ADU that's detached, I would think they still can only have 1 driveway, so they have to figure out how to, can you clarify that?
I don't, again, I looked at your code just enough to sort of answer things, but if you do have something in your local ordinance, or if there is a requirement from a DOT road opening permit or other components that limit it to 1 access point for a driveway, then you would still, that lot would still be limited to that provision. One thing, I can't speak to what some communities have done, but I can speak to one thing that I had worked on in my previous role for the city of Bath as I was crafting an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We were grappling with the same problem, and we determined that we would make it, that the city of Bath would make it so that stacked parking or parking one car behind the other would be allowed for the accessory dwelling unit only. Meaning that it would not be allowed if you were proposing that for multiple dwelling units, but that was something that they wanted to do within their local code to allow that. That being said, LD 2003 would not, you would not be able to say that accessory dwelling unit needs additional parking, but you may be able to clarify in your parking requirements that other ways of parking that you have not thought about, that you've not utilized in the past, may be applicable, and may be applicable in certain circumstances. I don't know if that made any sense.
No,
So
that helped.
okay.
That helped.
And there is we were asked last week to share a list of communities that have already adopted provisions of LD 2003. We only have a couple so far, primarily because either communities were holding off or it's town meeting season, so they've not fully had their town meeting yet. But we will be capturing more data from communities that are adopting these provisions. And I think the one that's the low-hanging fruit for a lot of communities is either adding a new accessory dwelling unit ordinance or amending something that was on the books already. And those parking conversations may be something that communities that already had an ADU ordinance on the books may be trying to determine, trying to answer those same questions. And the one thing that I think will be interesting to see is we would encourage you to speak with your legal counsel to make sure that you are still granting that right that the accessory dwelling unit does not need the additional parking if you are doing something different in your parking calculations or in the way that you look at how a parking space is created in a residential zone.
Okay.
To follow Deb, so if you, and I don't think we have this, but if you do, a municipality did have a requirement that in certain residential neighborhoods or zones, there would be no on-street parking. It would all have to be off-street parking. And that would be a blanket for the zone, area, neighborhood, whatever. And there were a garage attached or a parking pad for a home. Then an ADU would have to have something involved. You'd have to say, because there's no on-street parking, we're not requiring an additional parking space for the lot, but there has to be at least a parking pad or a shelter or a pull-off for the ADU. Follow me?
I do follow you.
I'm not sure I follow me.
Under statute, the ADU is not required to have additional parking, and when you were, if you are reviewing both adding your ordinances but also reviewing an application as the board, if that's what you choose to have as your provision, or if the code enforcement officer is reviewing an application, you would need to approve an application, a permit for an ADU without that parking space. If a homeowner has additional parking, at my own home, I think I can fit 10 cars in my driveway. I would have enough space regardless, but you legally cannot be requiring them to have the additional space for the ADU.
So you can keep the provision that there's no on-street parking, but you can't say that to have an ADU, there has to be a place to park that is not on the street.
Correct.
Correct. You can still have any applicable components, whether they're part of your land use code or something else, that handle public parking on the street, but you cannot be asking them for additional parking for the accessory dwelling unit.
Can we do minimum lease terms for ADUs?
Sure, yes, you can.
Short-term,
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Minimum what?
Minimum lease terms.
short-term rentals.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's exactly okay, what was the question and answer, sorry?
The question was, can you set minimum lease terms for ADUs?
Like, yeah,
And
no Airbnb.
you can do that. Ben and I have been suggesting, you don't have to do it this way, but we've been suggesting that you have a separate short-term rental ordinance to discuss this as opposed to putting it in the section with your ADU ordinance. We just feel like it could potentially be a bit cleaner and sort of, we're just worried about potentially sort of deterring the building of ADUs if you were to say in the ADU ordinance that it was sort of like you can't have short-term rentals by building this ADU. So we've been trying to think about strategies for communities to allow ADUs but also regulate short-term rentals. So there are multiple ways you could do it, but we think you should keep them separate.
Yeah, and statute 4364B, the ADU statute does specifically call out a previous statute that was enacted 2 years ago that essentially double gives the right for communities to have some sort of permitting process in place for a short-term rental, whether that's through a land use code or through some other provision. You still do have the right to have a process in place that addresses short-term rentals.
I just have a comment, is that okay?
Yeah. Grab the mic. Yeah, I'm not directing, he's directing. I'm trying not to direct.
Yes.
So anybody that has a question, just raise your hand and look at Ben.
You're facilitating.
I'm facilitating.
I forgot what I was going to say now. With the short-term rentals, so we could say that we don't allow it, but your advice is that we have a whole separate short-term rental ordinance.
Ideally, but we know that for some communities that is a big lift. So if you're looking to regulate short-term rentals, there are ways to add to the ADU ordinance section that you are interested in only having to set sort of time, like you could say, you have to rent the ADU for 30 days or more, or something like that.
Right.
But there are a lot of options. We're happy to sort of dig up some
I
examples
just
if
feel
that would be
like,
helpful.
so I guess my comment is, I'm not opposed to, I think that's some of why we're in where we're at. Short-term rentals have kind of taken over. But if the whole point of this legislation and this new rule is to make sure that we have affordable housing, it just seems to make sense to not allow or to really restrict the short-term rental thing. That defeats the whole purpose of this. Why wouldn't you have a restriction on it? If you had no restriction and 10 years down the road you looked at it and 90% of all this was short-term rental, what was the point?
And the original legislation, I believe, had some type of restriction on how long ADUs could be rented for. It was like 30 days or something like that. But I know that was sort of lost in the legislative process, so that originally was on the table. But now it's sort of up to communities to decide what makes the most sense.
And we would encourage, if there's a community that is thinking that you would like to have a specific short-term rental provision with specific numbers, a 30, a 60, whatever a day limit would be, we would encourage you to speak with an attorney who's versed in both fair housing laws and tenancy laws, because you would want to make sure that the ordinance isn't in conflict with existing laws regarding those two provisions.
Right. Because there's a lot already existing. So does it apply to the ones that have already been happening or only the new ones? So those would be the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Gentleman in the back.
After listening to various things that have been said. Any thought to a model ordinances coming out of your department and/or using the funds that you've got available for consultants to project a model ordinance that we all could work off of?
We're working on model ordinance components. The easiest model ordinance, and I think the one that hopefully will be the biggest bang for the buck, is the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, because that is probably something that either communities already have that hopefully won't require too many tweaks, or it's something you don't have that is relatively easy to stand up on its own. For the remaining components, especially the multiple dwelling provision in statute, I would say if you took the 3 or 4 communities that are in here and you compared your use tables and your dimensional requirements, that they're not going to look the same, which is one of the reasons why we've been struggling to create a statewide model ordinance, is that you've never been asked to have a particular standard for most of those provisions from the state. You technically aren't right now. The state is not telling you that you need to have a particular dimensional requirement. It's just requiring you to have particular uses in particular zoning districts. So parts of those puzzle pieces are easy for us to create a model ordinance on. The remaining other components of when you shift one thing, you have to make sure that multiple other parts of the code work well together, which I know that this planning board up here has had a legal analysis done on how those puzzle pieces all fit together. Those components are a little bit harder for us to craft a model ordinance that works for the entire state, because everybody is different. I suspect that we also will sort of have something that we can put together for an affordable housing development, but again, it's going to look differently. At least some of you were at last week's meeting where we were talking about the fact that a lot of communities try not to reinvent the wheel. You take existing ordinances from other communities and you figure out what works for your community and adopt those provisions. My guess is if and when we have a model ordinance, you'll probably want to do something similar where you can take certain provisions and adopt them into your own code. And we actually wrote our rules with that in mind. So especially for the accessory dwelling unit ordinance provision, but for many other provisions in statute, our rules allow you to have a similar definition or a similar type of component as long as you are meeting the requirements of statute and meeting those kind of the underlying components of what statute is stating.
But we are happy to share, we haven't seen very many communities that sort of have completed the whole process of writing ordinances and then going through town meeting or town council process and adopting ordinances, but we're happy to share what we have and what we have seen, if that would be helpful to communities to sort of think about, okay, this is what community A did, maybe we can take some of this or whatever. So if that's of interest, please let us know.
And for the communities here, I'll hopefully not promise too much from our great hosts here, but Bridgton has done a lot. They've had some good legal analysis that was done on their individual codes, and as you can see from the meeting tonight, they are trying to figure out how to implement these components. So if you're a community that isn't in Bridgton, you may just want to reach out to Deb or members of the board or staff to try to understand what process they've, if their process has worked, what they've kind of learned, and if there's anything from either the legal analysis or what they're starting to think of as they're tinkering, if those things would be applicable to your own community.
Is there a clearinghouse, a database of ordinances?
We're working on it.
Such a thing.
We will be in the process of trying to gather that information. That is a particular kind of lack of data that we have as a state agency, but we are working to try to get some of that piecemeal together. There is some good information from GrowSmart Maine on accessory dwelling unit ordinances that existed pre-LD 2003. So if you were a community that had never had a conversation around accessory dwelling units, there is quite a bit of information on communities that have something that was on the books prior to LD 2003. So if you wanted to look at those and kind of determine what makes sense and if it can be applied in the post-LD 2003 era, then you certainly could do that. But otherwise, we're working on getting all the other information from
Are we
communities.
required to send it to our ordinances to the state?
No.
We would welcome you sending information as you've adopted things, but no, you're not required to.
Yeah, from our perspective, we would love to see ordinances, not from an enforcement standard, but more for just to see what communities have done and see how communities have taken LD 2003 and run with it, and to see sort of what's working well, what's not working well. So we're really trying to collect data and then report back to the legislature and see if any tweaks need to be made to the legislation. So yeah, please.
I hope this is my last question. So assuming that a municipality has a zoning ordinance and all of the dimension requirements and the zone designations are passed by the town meeting and everyone's happy with it or else it wouldn't have passed, then it really wouldn't be necessary to make wholesale changes to the ordinance. We could add the language, the broad language of the up to 4 units and in growth areas or wherever and whatever about ADUs, and kind of overlay that without changing the dimensional requirements to fit the new intentions of 2003. Is that correct?
That potentially could be correct, but we do advise that communities do read through their entire ordinance and see if there's any areas where you might need a word change or something like that.
Definitely, but there's no requirement that we redo all of the agreed upon designations to fit requirements. We can, if everything else is equal and all of the language works out, we can simply add the language. So instead of saying 1 house per lot, it could be up to 4 dwelling units per lot and maintain the same requirements. So if those dimension requirements disallowed that, we wouldn't be under any obligation to make those changes.
You would not necessarily need to make changes to your dimensional requirements, but you more likely than not would need to make changes to your use table or however you designate the actual use provisions.
Right.
And you would definitely need to update your definitions because my guess would be there are probably none or almost no communities in the state that defined affordable housing development in the manner that that statute is asking you to define that prior to LD 2003.
Yeah, and I might add, just from a Bridgton perspective, one of the reasons we're looking at whether we need to change dimensional requirements, primary lot area per principal dwelling or residential unit, is because where the four additional dwelling units or 2 to 3 additional dwelling units apply, if there's areas of town where that could have significant negative impacts, whether it's environmental or something else, you leave yourself open if you just have a basic rule, go do it kind of thing. So, I had a question I don't know, folks. I just was wondering if you could share, is there anything folks have done in other towns or suggesting for protection of shoreland zones that's, is there anything you've heard that folks are considering that's more than just the, area per lot or excuse me, lot area per dwelling unit and these sorts of things?
I think I have seen anything, but if we do, I'm happy to happy to share it.
And my other question was, in the information we gave you, which I know you're looking like, you guys sound like you have way too much to do. But were there any red flags or anything in particular that, I mean, obviously a lot of what we've got down there is somewhat theoretical and we still have a lot of homework to do, but did you see anything of note, any red flags, anything in either our ordinance or in our sort of our plans for changes? And I just, as a note, I'd be happy to share what we're thinking of doing. Of course, it's always a work in progress, so.
I didn't see any red flags. Ben and I met quickly to see if there was anything that we would suggest, but I felt like the level of edits were on point. It seemed like you were redlining in the appropriate places and including the appropriate information. But I know there was a definition sort of table, so happy to go over any definitions that you might be, because I know there were some comments on the side.
And I just want to commend having, in previous roles, having worked through workshops with planning boards. I don't know who created the matrix of whether things are in the rules or need to be amended, but I want to commend you for going through that process as a board, because this is a great way for you all to be able to make sure that you're meeting statute in a very orderly fashion, which I feel like doesn't always happen in workshop setting. We may, we'll try not to send too many folks your way, but we may at least reference that if communities want to be organized, that this is a really good way of having that
I don't
organization.
think, I mean, sharing is not a problem as long as people realize that, you know, it might change tomorrow at our next workshop. I did that, it just helps my orderly mind. And our legal team often puts things together like that, which is very, so there's a little plagiarism involved.
So going back to shoreline zoning, the hypothetical is they've already done their 45% or 35% expansion, all of that was approved. Now they want to put an auxiliary dwelling unit in. Would that even be able to be considered? Because they've already expanded out all that they've done, you know, in shoreline zoning, they've already expanded as much of the property that they could. Wouldn't that preclude that they couldn't? Or are you saying because the state's stepping in and saying, we're requesting this, that you're gonna override that kind of thing and cause all kinds of havoc on my shoreland?
I have multiple ways of answering that. If you're thinking about it on your, as a municipality, then you would want to ensure that whatever codes you're writing if you would want to make sure that whatever the base district is, that district, if it's a standalone resource protection or residential X district, that still allows an accessory dwelling unit as an allowable use in the zoning district.
But if they've already reached their maximum expansion that the current ordinance allows, that's been approved by the state, that would preclude any other building? I mean, that's what happens now.
There's two ways to look at the impacts of LD 2003 on a district basis, of which the folks here have done a pretty decent analysis of how as an individual community they need to adopt new codes on a individual zoning district, and then on the parcel-based district. For the zoning district, that zoning district would need to allow accessory dwelling units, even if it's the shoreland overlay zoning district or a shoreland zone or resource protection zone. You would still need to allow as an allowable use ADUs if you allow housing in that zoning district. However, if it's an individual parcel, that parcel may or may not be able to add an ADU given shoreland zoning rules, setback requirements under the base zoning district and other things. If the landowner was asking us that question, we would tell them chat with DEP and the local code enforcement officer or whoever makes those determinations locally. But as a community who's adopting codes, we would recommend that you make sure that you adopt a code that allows for any lot within that zoning district to still take advantage of the new use of the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, so they have the potential of being able to do it, but they may not be able to get it because of other restrictions that have already occurred.
Gentleman in the back.
After listening again, is there a potential for developing a must-do list for each of these 3 buckets? This is what a town must do in this part of the law, this part of the law, and this part of the law. And maybe you've done it or I'm just not aware of it. That would sound like a minimum that people, towns had to respond to.
We don't have anything written, but I think that's a good idea and something that we can look into.
Yeah, and we've alluded to a presentation that we've done a couple of times, primarily to regional planning organizations, just for more bang of buck of getting folks like you in one room together. We're happy to do that presentation or something like this to any community, any regional planning group, anybody who's trying to understand what LD 2003 means. And part of our presentation over the last couple of times we've done it kind of goes into that of the how does it impact an individual community and what do you need to do to adopt those provisions if you have X, Y, and Z component in your community. But we're happy to talk about that as an individual basis if you email us or call us too.
And perhaps distinguishing that from options or could do's or bonus do's.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair point, right? Because short-term rentals is something you may do or an ordinance that you may write, but you don't have to write it. Versus there are very specific LD 2003 requirements that you would need to include in ordinance, so yes.
In the short term, that might be very helpful.
Yeah.
Have we worn ourselves out?
How many people are exhausted?
Yeah, my head's just there we go.
Thank you.
Any parting advice or for anybody?
Stick with it. I know that whether you are in the middle, in the thick of trying to think about these ordinances, or you've just started, you can get through it. It may look daunting, but it's not going to be that bad. Reach out to us. Reach out to your regional planning organizations. Ask for help if you need assistance. We have business cards. Our information is also on the back of the guidance document for those that took the guidance document. And we're always happy to help in whatever capacity we can.
I'm sure that are there deadlines for municipalities to get this going or approved or?
Right now, the law says July 1st. However, there is legislation that would amend that deadline for communities that have town meeting style of government. It would be July 1st, 2024. However, the legislature hasn't passed that yet. It's still in committee, but it may move forward. We don't exactly know exactly what's going to happen with the legislative body, but that's what's on the table right now.
Tonight, Walter was saying that, in a sidebar I had with him, that he thought it would probably be a few weeks before it got to the point where it'd be voted on. He did say it came out of committee, but nobody's seen the final wording of the bill.
They voted on multiple LD 2003 related bills, but they haven't gone through the formal process of reporting out yet. So we are waiting on that.
So it really only makes sense to pass it because when you've got a town meeting style of government, then all the ordinances have to go out to the public for vote. So they can't go out for vote for this time around because the warrants are done. It has to be next year. It's not even an option. And that will bring us to mid-June next year to have ordinances voted on for a July 1st implementation.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
That's assuming it passes.
We're going to be writing ordinances this
Right.
I need a
Yeah.
raise.
Each community will have to determine if you are a town meeting form of government community, you will have to determine are you going to place it on your annual town meeting or on a special town meeting?
Yeah.
Obviously, there are benefits to either one of those.
Yeah.
But yes,
then
Currently, the
special town
implement-
meeting qualify grant money?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And currently, the implementation date is July 1st of this year, and I believe by statute, you probably would not be able to get the warrant article in time for a special meeting for that date at this point.
Right.
We're already past the date.
Yeah.
That was our argument too, when we asked for delay. So, I'm gonna try and wrap it up here if I can. I initially thought we'd go through and any ideas we had, we would spit them out based on what we learned tonight and get them all on a list, but I think maybe a good thing is just everybody go back, and certainly I heard some things about parking and other things that we may want to consider adding to our list of changes. So what I just encourage board members to do is to go back and do that yourself before we lose sight of it. And DECD is always here to answer questions. They you go on their website, they have emails. I just ask, if you ask them a question, just make sure it gets shared. You're free to do that. Make sure it gets shared on the OneDrive with the rest of the board. But, you know, if you run it across things and you have questions, particularly technical questions, they clearly are good at the answers. So that's kind of my thoughts. Is anybody else on the board have other thoughts about follow-up?
It's a good idea.
Okay.
And it's good that you're able to have these folks here.
Yes, absolutely. We may want, our next scheduled workshop would be the mid-June. If folks want to do something sooner, send me a note. I mean, obviously, at this point, we're not going to make July 1st anyway. So we can be methodical about it and hope that the legislature gets passed. But if it's not, probably we're going to be certainly under the gun come June, July, and August to have more workshops. So something to think about. Maybe just contact me individually instead of us trying to decide on squeezing an extra meeting in on May.
Deb, that would be June 20th.
Well, that is a long way away.
Because the first Tuesday in June is the 6th.
So that's quite a ways away. So what I'll do is I'll go back and just look at the calendar of our meetings and work with Laura Lee and Tori to suggest something before that. Thanks, Steve. That is a
Well, I'm
long
not
time.
suggesting we needed anything before. I was just giving you the date.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we might need something before. And I guess any more questions from anybody? Okay. I really want to thank Hillary and Benjamin for coming out here, and also I guess Carl, right? Is that right? I assume it's a long drive out, and really appreciate your time, especially after you spent the day working, and to come out here and spend time with us. So it's very much appreciated and very helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for participating.
Thank you
Good
for
question. And
Motion to adjourn?
is there a second? Ken motions to adjourn, second by
I'll
Laura.
second it.
All in favor?